The sound of the bracelet hitting the floor was sharp, cutting through the thick silence in the house. It bounced once, twice, before coming to rest by the edge of the fireplace. I stood frozen, staring at it, my heart racing. It wasn't the first time I had seen this bracelet. I had noticed it before, hanging from my stepmother's wrist, glinting in the dim light of the living room. But this was different. I picked it up carefully, feeling its cool weight in my hand. The bracelet was delicate, intricate, with a small charm shaped like a leaf, worn at the edges. It had always looked out of place on her slender wrist, as if it belonged to someone else. But the thing that made my stomach twist wasn't the bracelet itself. It was the realization that I had seen it before, tucked into the pocket of my father's coat just days before he left. I had tried not to think about it, about the way my stepmother's eyes had flickered when I asked her where he had gone, or the way she hadn't quite met my gaze when she told me he was away on business. I had wanted to believe her. I had wanted to trust her, to believe that the house I had grown up in wasn't a facade built on secrets and lies. But as I stood there, holding the bracelet, I knew I had been wrong. The sound of footsteps broke my trance, and I quickly stuffed the bracelet into my pocket, hoping she hadn't seen. She entered the room, her expression calm, too calm. Her hair was perfect as always, her makeup flawless. But her eyes were different. They were dark, like someone who had spent too long hiding behind a mask. She smiled at me, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Did you find something, dear?" she asked, her voice soft, like she hadn't a care in the world. I swallowed hard, my voice barely a whisper. "The bracelet. It's my father's, isn't it?" For a moment, she didn't speak. Her gaze flickered down to where I had hidden my hand in my pocket, and then back up to my face. The smile faded, just for a second, and in that moment, I saw it, the fear. "It's just a piece of jewelry," she said quickly, almost too quickly. "Your father gave it to me years ago. It means nothing." I could hear the lie in her voice, and it made the bile rise in my throat. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but I stayed silent. What would it change? The damage had already been done. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. "Don't tell him," she said, her tone cold now, the mask back in place. "It's better for both of us if you don't." The words hung in the air, sharp like the bracelet I had found. It was a threat, veiled in sweetness, but it carried the weight of a promise. A promise that this was something I would never be allowed to speak of again. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had already made up my mind. When my father returned, I wouldn't tell him. I would let him keep living in his oblivious peace, in his delusion that the woman he loved was nothing but pure. But I knew, in the silence of the house, in the weight of the bracelet in my pocket, that nothing would ever be the same. The house, built on glass and lies, would never feel safe again. And in the silence that followed, I knew I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The bracelet had fallen from my father's coat pocket, and in that moment, I realized how much I had already lost. The days following the discovery of the bracelet were heavier. As if the house had grown colder overnight. My stepmother became more distant, her smile a mask she wore only for appearances, while her eyes remained shadowed, filled with things she couldn't quite hide. It was in the small things, the way she moved too quickly past me, the way her hand trembled when she picked up a glass, the way she avoided looking me directly in the eye. She knew I had seen the bracelet. And though I didn't confront her again, I could feel the tension simmering between us, thick enough to suffocate. Each time I passed her in the hallway or the kitchen, I'd hear the faintest click of the bracelet against her wrist. It had become a reminder, a ticking clock counting down to a truth neither of us could ignore. But I couldn't bring myself to tell my father. I couldn't ruin the fragile world he had built for himself, even if it was built on broken glass. I had seen enough of that world to know how easily it could shatter. That night, as I sat at the table pretending to eat, I watched her. Her fingers twitched every now and then, like she was on edge, unable to stop herself from checking the door, the clock, or the phone. She wasn't waiting for him to come back. She was waiting for something worse, to be caught. To have the whole house turned upside down by the weight of her secrets. When I stood to leave, I felt her eyes on me, heavy and accusing. "You're not going to tell him, are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, but sharp with something deeper. Something desperate. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. My silence was my answer. And in that silence, I realized that we were both trapped. She was stuck in the web of her own lies, unable to break free. And I was stuck in my own silence, holding on to a truth that I could never share. The bracelet still sat in my pocket, a cold reminder of everything we could never undo. The house felt smaller now, suffocating. The walls, once a place of comfort, had turned into a cage. And as I lay in bed that night, I could hear her, downstairs. The faint clink of the bracelet against the wood. Like a ghost of the past reaching out to remind me that some things, once discovered, could never be forgotten. The air in the house felt heavier the following days. Thick with an unspoken tension that neither of us dared to break. My stepmother moved through the halls like a ghost. Her presence no longer as comforting as it once was. Every time I caught a glimpse of her, the bracelet shimmered in the corner of my eye. An unspoken reminder of everything that had come to light. The same bracelet that had fallen from my father's coat pocket. The same bracelet that held a story I didn't want to know, yet couldn't stop unraveling in my mind. One evening, I found her sitting by the window. The faint light of the dying day casting long shadows on her face. She was staring out at the bay, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the curve of the bracelet around her wrist, as if she didn't realize I was standing there. I wanted to ask her everything. I wanted to demand the truth, why she had kept this secret. Why she thought I wouldn't notice, why she hadn't protected me the way she had promised. Instead, I stood there in silence, watching her, feeling the weight of everything that was unsaid between us. "Do you ever wonder how we got here?" she asked suddenly, her voice hollow, like a woman who had already made peace with the things she could never change. I didn't answer, but I didn't have to. She knew. She knew that I had seen it all, the lies, the distance. The secrets that had been buried under layers of false affection. And she knew that no matter how hard she tried, no matter how many times she smiled at me with that fragile, practiced kindness, the truth had already seeped into the cracks. She turned to face me then, her eyes filled with something I couldn't place, guilt, shame, or perhaps just resignation. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she whispered, almost to herself. "I never meant for you to be involved." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their meaning. I could feel the years of tension, of secrets shared only between her and my father, of the love that had been twisted by lies, all boiling to the surface. And for the first time, I realized that the woman I had once seen as my protector was just as trapped in this house as I was. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. There was nothing more to be said. The truth was already out, buried beneath the silence between us. in the same place the bracelet had fallen, where it would always remain. As I turned to leave, I heard her speak again, this time quieter. Like a prayer she didn't want anyone to hear. I thought you'd never find out. And with that, I walked away. I didn't know if it was for the best. If my silence had been a form of protection or just my own way of avoiding the inevitable. But as I closed the door behind me, the weight of the bracelet still lingered in the air. A reminder that nothing ever stays hidden forever. The next few days dragged on like the slow tick of a clock. Each second passing with a weight I couldn't shake. I tried to ignore the gnawing feeling at the back of my mind, but it was always there, constant. Relentless, a reminder of the truth I could no longer escape. My stepmother's presence in the house felt suffocating. Like a shadow that followed me through every room. We moved past each other like strangers, exchanging only the barest of words. And even those felt like they were suffused with something unspoken. Something we both knew but refused to acknowledge. One afternoon, I found myself in the study, searching for something to occupy my restless mind. The old leather-bound books on the shelves. The soft creak of the floorboards underfoot, it should have felt familiar, comforting. But instead it felt like a tomb. I ran my fingers over the spines of the books, stopping when I felt something odd beneath my fingertips. I pulled the book from the shelf, a dusty volume of poetry I had never noticed before, and a small, folded piece of paper fell from between the pages. I opened it quickly, my heart pounding as I read the words scrawled in my father's handwriting. I'll make sure she never finds out. The blood drained from my face as the realization hit me. He had known. He had known all along. I sat down, the world suddenly spinning around me, and I held the paper in my hands, trying to make sense of the words that didn't make sense. I wanted to believe it was all a mistake. Maybe he had meant something else, maybe it wasn't what I thought. But the weight of the bracelet, the cold weight of the truth I had been carrying for days, told me otherwise. My father had known, and yet, he had left. He had gone to work, gone on business trips, left me here with the woman who had betrayed him. Who had betrayed us both. And now, she was the one left behind to pick up the pieces. But what pieces were there to pick up? Everything had already shattered, long before I had ever found the bracelet. Long before I had ever seen the truth behind the mask she wore. The door to the study creaked open, and I looked up to find my stepmother standing there. Her eyes scanning the room before landing on me. She didn't say anything at first. She just watched me, her expression unreadable. "Did you find something?" she asked, her voice steady but tight with something I couldn't place. I stood up slowly, my hands trembling as I held the paper in front of me. "He knew," I said, my voice low, but it felt like the loudest thing in the room. "He knew about the bracelet. About everything." She flinched, just the slightest movement, but it was enough. It was enough to tell me everything I needed to know. "You never asked me," she said, her voice almost a whisper now. "You never wanted to know. I kept it all hidden so you wouldn't have to face it." I shook my head, the anger bubbling up in my chest, the betrayal, the hurt. All of it rising to the surface. I didn't need to ask. "You made sure I knew without saying a word." Her eyes softened, but I could see the truth behind them now. The truth she had tried to hide. She had never protected me, not from him, not from herself. And I realized in that moment that the woman who had promised to protect me had been just as broken as the rest of us. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken words, and I turned to leave, feeling the weight of the paper still in my hand. The weight of the truth that would never be erased. Before I reached the door, she called out to me, her voice quiet and full of something, regret. Maybe, or sorrow. I thought you'd be better off not knowing. I didn't turn back. I couldn't. Because I knew now, and nothing could change that. The house, the lies, the bracelet, they would always be a part of us, a part of me. And as I stepped out of the study, the door closing softly behind me, I realized there was nothing left to protect. Nothing but the shattered pieces of a family that had long since broken. The days blurred together, the weight of the truth settling deeper into my bones. Every step I took in the house felt heavier, each corner more suffocating than the last. I found myself wandering through the rooms, unable to escape the feeling that everything had already been decided. My father, my stepmother, the bracelet, it all felt like a tangled web. A lie I could no longer untangle, no matter how hard I tried. My stepmother's presence had become an echo, a shadow that followed me everywhere I went. She still moved through the house with the same practiced grace. Her quiet footsteps on the marble floor, the soft clink of the bracelet against her wrist. But I no longer saw the woman who had once been a mother to me. Instead, I saw the woman who had betrayed the man she had promised to love. The woman who had left the cracks in our family wide open for me to discover. One evening, after dinner, I found myself standing by the window, watching the last of the sun dip beneath the horizon. The house was eerily quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I felt as if I were watching someone else's life unfold before me. As though I were outside looking in. The door to the living room creaked open, and I turned to see my stepmother standing in the doorway, her eyes flicking to me before quickly looking away. She took a step forward but stopped just short of where I stood. "I never meant for you to find out," she said, her voice so small it barely registered. But the words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore. I didn't answer. What could I say? The truth was out, and nothing could take it back. I had seen the cracks, felt the weight of the lies. And now I knew, there was nothing left to save. "I thought I was protecting you," she continued, her words so quiet I almost didn't hear them. "I thought if I kept everything hidden, kept everything perfect, you wouldn't have to face it." I swallowed hard, the bitterness rising in my throat. "Protect me?" I repeated, the word tasting foreign on my tongue. "You didn't protect anyone. You just kept the truth locked away like it didn't matter." Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't name, regret, guilt, maybe even fear. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. "But sometimes we do things we think are for the best. And we don't realize the damage we're causing." I turned away from her, unable to meet her eyes any longer. The bracelet, the lies, the secrets, it was all too much. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. That I could just move past the hurt and the betrayal. "You should leave," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "Just go. It's over." She didn't speak. Instead, she stood there, the silence between us growing heavier. Until finally, she nodded. Slowly, she turned and walked out of the room without another word. The door clicked shut behind her, and the house fell silent once again. But it was a different kind of silence now. One that was filled with everything we had failed to say. Everything that would never be said again. I stood there for a long time, the weight of the bracelet in my pocket. The weight of the truth pressing down on me. The house, once a home, now felt empty, empty of the love I had once believed was real. Empty of the promises made and broken. And as I stood there, the last light of day fading, I realized that the house would never be the same again. Neither would I.